Ma'am Ishita Dey, and Sir Mr. Shibendu Das. Welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, let me begin with this quick brief. Dr. Ishita Dey is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology, Faculty of Social Sciences, South Asian University, Delhi. Her research interests are migration, labor, food, and census. She has co-anchored an art research project on smells of the city with a focus on Delhi, supported by Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, Delhi. She has been working on the life of sweets and sweetness in West Bengal and Bangladesh. Her work in sweets has been published in the Oxford Companion to Sugar and Sweets journals such as Gastronomica, International Journal of South Asian Studies, and edited volumes Farm to Fingers, The Culture and Politics of Food in Contemporary India. It's an honor to have you, ma'am. Shibendu Das is a journalist, content designer, branding consultant, and a food explorer who has written extensively on the F&B scene of Kolkata for over 8 years in the Telegraph newspaper. Coming from a family that traces its origin to Sielkat Akastri Hatta of undivided Bengal, Shibendu Das has grown up in the erstwhile French colonial town of Chandonnagor on the banks of the Hooghly, known for being the hub of Mishti making in South Bengal. When not busy eating or studying food ethnography, you may find him backpacking while crooning an old Bengali song or two. They're joining us for the session, Researching Sweetness in Epar and Opar, Caste, Labor, and Changing Aesthetics. Over to you two. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello. Am I audible? Clear? Great.
Hello.
Yeah, fine. Hi, good afternoon. I'm not very used to do something like this. This is my first time probably doing an in-conversation within this kind of event of this stature. I'm really feeling honored and privileged that I'm doing this first in-conversation with Dr. Ishita Dey. Because I'll tell you, like, I'll start with a very personal note, on a very personal note that I have been writing on food for now almost a decade. I started with the Telegraph newspaper, and then now I am a freelancer. And whenever in 2000, basically I forgot the year that we met, but right now I can say that she is my 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. guide. Like whenever I need to find some information or I'm stuck with something that I really want to know, and which can be very basic, and like almost to the point of like, এটা একটা প্রশ্ন নাকি, like is it this, even this is a question, but I know that I can always call her up or message her, and she is so sweet that she will always give me like more than enough information so that I have a clear understanding. Now, so already you have heard Ishita's background. But I had a special privilege of assisting her personally in her research work on GI tagging, which is geographical indication tagging, and Bengal's Mishti in West Bengal back in 2018. And that kind of introduced me to look at Mishti through the academic lens. And since then, this journey has been phenomenal. Coming back to Ishita, so let us start, before we deep dive, Ishita, into our today's topic, which is caste and labor and modernization and mechanization in aesthetics of the Mishti industry and Mishti shops in Bengal, Epar and Opar. Let me start with your own story. I mean, your PhD thesis is on Mishti. So how did you manage to get sweetness into your university area? And I mean, to begin with, and why Mishti? And you know, what was it like you started with Mishti?
Thank you. It gives immense privilege to come back to Kolkata and share my work, particularly because there are people in this room without whose family involvement this work would never have been possible, right? Rarely do you get an opportunity, particularly as anthropologists, rarely do we get opportunities to share our work with our interlocutors, right? And I think this is that brilliant opportunity. But on that note, there was a particular food chef and historian who goes by the name Michael Crondall. He was visiting Calcutta on a book project, sweet innovation. He had to visit India because India is one of the places of sweet making. And he had actually visited Kesida's factory by then, Michael Crondall. And he had collected a lot of interesting material from the Kesida's family, Michael Crondall. And then he said that, and I kept on asking, but you're not asking the question of changing labor conditions, all of that. And then he was like, that's a sociological question, because he came around asking me that, Ishita, can you give, like, what is this Moira word? And he was like, I'm loosely translating as a confectioner. I said, no, there has been a semantic shift. Moira as a word, it means a caste group who was traditionally associated with sweet making. But there has been a semantic shift over a period of time whereby a caste name has become the name for an entire profession, right? And that, if it was not Michael coming to, and that time I was planning to do something on Chinese food in Calcutta. Michael posted a booklet of, I think, 75 years of Kesidas. It was a red-colored booklet, right? Yes. He posted that booklet because the booklet he had was both in Bangla and English. And he wrote that booklet, on that Bangla booklet he wrote, that, Ishita, I hope it inspires you to change your PhD topic. I never thought what he meant, because when you're young, you also want to do other things. But I started off actually with a question that, let me at least explore. It might lead me somewhere. And that was my entry into the caste labor question of Mishti Industry. Now the project has turned completely different, slightly different. Still caste and labor is at the heart of it. Right. But yes, so
taking from there, like as you said, like when Crondall asked you that who are these Moiras, and so to rephrase what you said, probably the way we used to say in school that probably all Moiras are Mishti makers, but all Mishti makers aren't Moiras.
Absolutely.
So can you please decode Moira, the caste, and this entire proliferation of this word, the semantics of it, in the Mishti industry of Bengal today?
So very interestingly, when I started off the project, it was about starting, methods of production, changing methods of production. And when I went about actually inquiring, I was like, let me start off with a place where statistically it's being shown. Because please remember, caste census has disappeared now, right? But caste census was a very much part of colonial India to manage and rule, right? So in that caste census, there was a lot of statistical information on the number of Moiras that are there in Hooghly, in undivided Bengal. And I'm like, what is happening in this domain? And then I came across, let's put it this way, you're very lucky in your field work if you come across very excellent well-wishers. And somehow I stumbled upon excellent well-wishers in National Archives. And in National Archives, that time, the person who was very, very instrumental, I think, in most of our research, who have spent times in National Library, he directed me to two interesting newsletters. One is Modok Shonghita, that was published in 1921. The other is Modok Hitoishini, 1924. And later on, when actually I visited Bhimnag, and I said, I know a lot about Ashutosh Nag from one of the newsletters. And he was very, very kind. The person sitting there was very, very kind to give me a phone number saying, go and contact Bolaida. And then I realized that very much that the that the Modak Samaj had organized themselves, and there was this caste association-based newsletters that were getting published for the longest time. What is the relevance of the Moiras? Behind every sweet invention, you will find a name of a Moira, right? Nobin Moira, Shujji Moira, right? Including Jonaiyer Monohara, where also you find that it could have been the Nag Moiras, right? But it is very brilliant that, how every time I have tried to find out the invention around Jonai, there's a very interesting statements have come about. Yes, as Nags, we were there in Jonai, maybe, but we do not have, but there is no claim making. But if you really, and in this landscape of the sweet invention, there is always a figure of the Moira that comes about. But are Moiras the only sweet makers? Not necessarily. If you really go to Joynagar Moa, right? Joynagar Moa, it has actually been it is beyond the Moira dynamics. It actually, people belonging to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and the Mahishos. When I went over to Bangladesh with this, I finished the thesis, and I faced a interesting question from a food historian who asked me, is Moira only a Hindu word? And it is true, right? I mean, there are Muslim sweet makers. What is the word that they use? And I do not have that data. I thought, let me think about Bengal from Epar and Opar and change the lens. I had studied Hooghly and Nodia from this side. So I thought, let me do the North Bengal from that side. So it sort of mirrors each other. And it is also based on the data that I had first figured out about the Moiras, and I realized a lot of people had migrated from Malda Murshidabad areas of this side to Rajshahi. And then when I walked into the Sweetmeat Traders Association office in Dhaka, and I met the office secretary, Mr. Animesh Sarkar, and I asked him, এখানে কি মিষ্টির ব্যবসাটা কি ময়রাদেরই আছে? এককালে ছিল? He was like, Moira Kara. That was a telling tale about that probably this generalization about Moirara Mishti Banai that we had has something that needs to be questioned. And then I said, Ekhane Kara Mishti Banai? Ghoshera. So Ghosh as a surname gets generalized as a occupational name once again, and the same Ghosh had been generalized as part of a milk supply chain, right? In Epar Bangla. Ki Ghoshader kaছ থেকে আমরা দুধ নিই, তারপরে মিষ্টি হয়, and when I went over to Bangladesh and I started my fieldwork in December 2017, and when I moved to South Asian University, life became a little easier to do the fieldwork in the whole of Rajshahi division, where I started getting very, very interesting this thing around Bogura Doi's innovation, and these were all Ghoshes. So when I go to the Bangladesh newspaper archives, it's about Ghoshera ei mishti baniyeche. When I go through the newspaper archives of Epar Bangla, ei Moirader ei innovation. But between Moira and Ghosh is also Mahishya community, Boishyos are making sweets, all of this, and the invisible women's labor. But that's a question, I think, for another session.
Yes, there's another session which is Mishti sexist, which will be following today only. So please be there. Ishita, from here, I'd love to ask you one more thing about your research on Epar and Opar. So when you went over to Bangladesh and you started, I think there is an excellent podcast on Gastronomica on Bogurat Doi, which Ishita is in conversation with Dr. Shibendu of New York University. So please, if you Google it, you will find it. So please listen to that. That's a very, very informative conversation. So taking from there, I am very inquisitive to know that when you go to Bangladesh and you see the mishti making there, what is the difference is there any primary difference that you find in the approach towards mishti making from the labor perspective?
That's a very, very important question. From the workings of the sweet shop, again you find a semantic shift. এখানে আমরা বলি জোগাড়ে কারিগর, right? Their karigor is the Karigor is a sort of a derogatory word. Karigor is between the Jogare and the Karigor. Karigor has been replaced with the word Ustad, right?
Wow.
So, এখানে কি হয় জোগাড়ে তারপরে কেউ পাটার কারিগর হয়ে যায় উনুনের কারিগর হয়ে যায় রাইট মানে দ্যাট টু ওভার ইয়ার্স অফ এক্সপিরিয়েন্স ওখানে অন দ্য আদার সাইড the semantic word ustad also comes about which also tells you of a Bangladesh post 71 right? And of a different kind of, let's put it this way, of the ways in which our Bangla as a language is also shaped, everyday Bangla language.
I love the name Ustad. Like, we have to clap them. They are Ustads.
They're actually Ustads.
Yeah.
And what I really, there is also a taxonomy that I found, and I was very hesitant, to make this classification.
Right.
But I also found a distinct Hindu sweets and a distinct Muslim sweets that has emerged in Bangladesh. That is also here per se, but you see it much more vividly there. Also this association, apnara mishti banan, apnara implying me, part of a Hindu culture with a Hindu surname, right? So this associational ties in Bangladesh, je apnar mishtir ব্যবসাটা তো আপনাদেরই. But also what Bangladesh, in terms of karigori, etc., what I think, what they have managed to do, if you go to Dhaka, you will see a sweet shop. I think many of us have been to that shop called Banglar Mishti বা Sweets of Bengal, run by the Bengal Foundation. And they have put up this very interesting sweet map inside their sweet shop. They have not made the sweets, how do I put it? They have not diluted the taste of the sweets. They just served the sweets on ceramic plates, etc., and deconstructed the imagination of what a sweet shop could look like, right? So one, I feel, is that some of the recipes or some of the look and feel of the sweets, as anthropologist, I'm much more interested in the look and feel of the sweets, and some of the sweets have remained unchanged over a period of time, and people love sweets, right? And the madness about sweets, I think, yes, we are mad about sweets, but as I open the introduction, of my book manuscript, hopefully I'll submit this year. I know Lily is laughing because I'm with you, Lily, on that. Hopefully I'll submit this year. I actually begin with that in Bangladesh, when I go to a sweet shop, this was Muslim sweets, and I say that, I want this sweet, because here we are used to buying sweets per piece. And then there's a joke that, in Calcutta, you may be buying sweets per piece, but here we love buying sweets per kg, right, by weight. And then when I was like, but how can people eat so much sweets? I mean, I'm still like a good Calcuttan. I'm like, there are 5 people in that house. So, okay, maybe a box of 20 pieces of sweets. And then I remember the owner of Muslim Sweets sat me down and said, this is against the sociality of gifting of sweets, At least take 3 kg, 5 kg of sweets. This is the minimum. I was shocked, like a very good miserly Ghoti, Bengali, and all of that, all the stereotypes that you have about cultures actually came about. But the obsession about sweets not only is in the quantity of sweets people eat, but also the fact that sweets are much more sweeter. I think the sweets here have, the sweetness quotient of sweets in West Bengal mostly is slightly milder if you compare it to Bangladesh, certain parts, right? This has also to do with the fact that sweetness industry, and it's not today that, people think about how to increase the shelf life. The sweet makers have been experimenting with the shelf life of sweets ever since they have invented sweets. Monohara is a classic case of that, increasing the shelf life. You give it a sugar coating and you increase the shelf life. Korapak Sandesh, brilliant example of without refrigeration how you can increase the shelf life. Similarly, there is something called Lot Chom Chom that you find in Chapai Nawabganj, where there is a sugar coating, and on that there's a sugar syrup coating, and on that sugar syrup coating there is khoya dust, right? And you might, and it's soaking in sugar syrup. And moment I took a bite, someone said, one of the karigors said, you might not be used to this type of sweets because in Opar Bangla, you eat less sweet sweets, right?
Right.
And I think only in Bengal you can have a oxymoron category, kom mishti mishti, right?
Kom mishti
Beshi mishti. So I think this categorization has come about, beshi mishti and kom mishti, and also sugar-free mishti, right? Sugar-free mishti is a very interesting category that has come about in the recent times, which I have not found actually so much yeah, I mean, like here in suburbs also you will find one sweet that will be said, ota diabetic patient ra khete pare, right? But there, you know, they will pass off, many sweet makers will say, you can take the kacha golla, but this diabetic mishti as a category, at least in the Rajshahi division, let me put it this way, has not emerged. But some of the older traditions of this Bengal is something you can find that side. Like, I remember, right, Raghav Shai is one sweet, right? You remember you asking me, and I was like, yes, of course, I have seen it in the list of sweet shops there. Posto Kodam, that we find in Murshidabad, you still, karigors still take granules of poppy seeds, coat it in sugar syrup. Poppy seeds are this tiny, right, posto? They actually dip the posto dana in sugar syrup, coat it with a sugar syrup lining, and then, you know, create a casing of that crystallized posto dana, a layer of kheer, and then inside that, sugar-rich, a sugar-rich, soft, spongy, not the texture of the Rasgulla, but a texture of a chom-chom inside it.
I'm getting a sugar high just by listening to that. Ishita, like this kom mishti, beshi mishti, so this also brings it. Right now I have open with me your thesis chapter, which is on health, standardization and Bengali sweets. And you have also worked on, extensively worked on like this age corona, anti-corona sweets and this, that. So what's your take on this entire, I know that there is a separate session with doctors who will be talking about healthcare and health and mishti and diabetes. But from your anthropological point of view, how do you see this pattern evolving over the recent years with so much emphasis on health, diabetes, which India is the diabetes capital, they say, and our obsession with sweets?
One sweet shop put out an interesting ad, and there is a brilliant archive of the Paschim Bangla Mishtanno Babshayi Shomiti newsletter, Mishti Kotha. And in one of the newsletters of Mishti Kotha, there was a brilliant ad. Mishti khawa diabetes, Mishti khele diabetes hoy na, Mishti khawa diabetes rogir পক্ষে ক্ষতিকর, রাইট?
ডায়াবেটিস হলে মিষ্টি কম খেতে হয় এরকম কিছু।
হ্যাঁ, ওরকম মানে মিষ্টি খাওয়া ডায়াবেটিস রোগীর পক্ষে ক্ষতিকর, রাইট? মিষ্টি খেলে ডায়াবেটিস হয় না। And I hold on to that because if you really look at, today Mother Dairy is selling a product called probiotic curd. But the probiotics of curd, if you, if I may be a little brave here, if you ever get to manage a tour of the sweet factory outlets of Kesidas in Bangalore and the laboratory, that is how the quality control should have. They actually have embraced what in quality control we called hazard analysis critical control points, which means that you devise your own critical control points. So the water is tested, the milk is tested, because please, milk is bacteria prone, right? Milk is bacteria prone, water is bacteria prone, but you don't need to wear gloves to create great sweets. But if you actually keep on testing these various things, the supply chain, if you ensure a healthy supply chain, that's why, without good quality milk, you cannot have good quality sweets. If you ensure safe quality milk supply, right? That is what my experience of working in that Kesidas laboratory, if I may tell you, was only in the last bit, the sensory score exercise, okay? That does a lab tested product, and it's a very important part of, if you're giving quality products, the taste shouldn't go down. That's where the sensory score exercise was very, very important. As Dr. A.M. Natarajan would explain me, who was there as the senior scientist then when I was doing the field work, that, Ishita, you're here, we'll take an opportunity, you do the sensory score exercise along with some of our students. And he had a very interesting thing to say. He said, see, my students will know the texture, break, stability, etc. But your tongue has been trained culturally. How do I create a product which will attune to a culturally trained tongue? যেখানে জিভটা তৈরি হয়ে গেছে, right? And how do we really, really embrace that? And I think this was one of the very, very, this thing. So when it comes to health and sweets, I have a simple take about, let's not go with the approach, are sweets healthy, right? There are many other food products, butter, in moderation, everything can be, it's also up to my body and my make, right? I mean, diabetes is also caused by a sedentary lifestyle. Let's be very honest about it. But are sweets healthy? Of course, and one way to look at, I think, the beshi mishti in sweet, every time someone comments, "Ei mishti da to beshi mishti," and I'm like, oh my God, we have been so used to refrigeration, and I wouldn't have known this if I had not visited Bangladesh. That this beshi mishti quotient probably is to keep a sweet straight from the hari to our mouths, right? And some of the sweet shops still managed. At least when I was doing my field work, I did find a sweet shop in Krishnagore, which Shibendu also visited in 2018, which still runs without a refrigerator, right? And there has been no E. coli outbreaks and all of that. So, and this is where I think I really like, there is one way to think about it is packaging, but also how do we really manage to create an ecosystem, keep, the businesses alive, and yet not lose sight of the freshness of a product.
Right. And that, your reference to Krishnanagar, that brings me to this question of, you have personally, literally got your hands, not dirty, but sweet, Mishti, working in 3 different iconic Mishti shops of Bengal. So, from Kesi Das on one of,
only
end
sensory
of the
score.
yeah,
Only sensory score.
on the one end of the spectrum to Krishnanagar Shorbhaja Shorpuria Mishti Dokan to a Chandanagar Surji Moira. So, and all these 3 shops, when we talk about modernization and evolving aesthetics of Indian Mishti and Bengal's Mishti, you have seen 3 different stages probably, and where on the one hand the workshop and the shop are not at all different, they are the same. Where you are buying the Mishti, the workshop is right there, and then there is something which is very sanitized, and a lot of other regulations are in place. So this journey, you have seen it all in the same time happening. What do you think the future of Mishti industry is going, and how does that will affect the functionality of sweets?
I think the future of sweet industry is in the hands of and I think as Lohana brilliantly put it, because every time, there are many sad stories also in the book where one of the karigor is saying that আজকে নারেগাতেও তো 100 টাকা পায় minimum roj, right? I mean, in the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, if I go to the village, I'll get 100. So people are like, people are really wondering what will happen to skilled artisans. And sweet shop owners are also lamenting, amra ar bhalo karigor pai na, right? So one, I think, craftsmanship has not died out because there is everyday innovation, and that we find during Bhai Phota. Name any parad dokan to the best of the names, there will be one mishti that they will introduce for that year, right? And we are all, we have all tasted it, we have all savored it. So I think there has to be a ecosystem of training artisans into this thing. Also, I think creating an ecosystem of honoring the artisans, and I know Cadbury Mishti, I think last time had a place for honoring the karigor. And I think if we could, really, the same breadth in which we are creating ecosystems of, honoring the karigor, honoring like without the chana supplier and the milk supplier, this business, and it will not thrive, right? So I think honoring the ecosystems equally, and this is something, if I may a little be brave, that let's also, like when we go outside, we see one cheese factory and one cheese museum, right? I hope this city one day manages to have a Mishti museum, right? Yes, and
ট্যুরিজম কি বানানো সম্ভব? আই এম অমাইক এনাফ। কোন মিষ্টি ট্যুরিজম কি বানানো সম্ভব? মানে লাইক উই হ্যাভ চকলেট ট্যুরিজম, টি ট্যুরিজম, স্কচ ট্যুরিজম, হোয়াটএভার ট্যুরিজম।
মিষ্টি মিউজিয়াম অ্যাকচুয়ালি বানানো সম্ভব if we I think, for why I'm saying Mishti Museum, because it is very, very important to introduce that sensorial aspect of Mishti. Chanar joler je gandho, that, I may romanticize, okay? But, for my mother may romanticize because her father had a sweet shop. But I remember my field note diary still smelled of milk, even years later. I would not take that diary out, let's put it this way, with other people. So why I think a Mishti Museum is possible, because it's a living heritage. If we think of museum slightly innovatively, okay? I'm not saying, but it has to be a sensorial exercise, right? And of the mundane things that is associated with sweets, nobody thinks like chana whey water drink was an experiment that was carried about long way ago. Today what we know as probiotic drinks and all of that, right? If you really think about, say, something like the whey water, the cheese, the chanar je kaporta rangano hoy, egulo to amader jana uchit, na? I think it is about knowledge creation, right? It is about knowledge creation. It is about also educating ourselves about where is the Mishti coming from, right? Starbucks er dokane to ek rokomer ki bole amra jani coffee beans kotheke ashe ekটু guilty o feel koray amader je eto ki bole. I would say it is more about really knowing the amount of labor that goes into it, right? It's the family labor, hired labor, a supply chain, and the supply chain actually is immense. If you get an opportunity to talk to many of the people who are right from the business, the supply chain is very well networked. There's a chana local in West Bengal. I don't know how many of you didn't, but I think a history something needs to be written and documented about the chana local, right? And when that chana local passes through, like Chandanagar, right? Remember? Like we take it very much part about that it stings, right?
It stings.
But without that stench, this beauty of Shandesh would not be possible, right? So let's honor the stench, and I think to create that knowledge ecosystem, it will also lead to a respecting of the labor, right? If the labor gets respected, the sweet shops we pay a lot of money for baked products, right? And there are issues of, there are many number of articles that are getting published in Mishti Kotha, which is the association, which used to be the association newsletter, right? Divanda is here. Which used to be the association newsletter, where Dulal Gupta Sharma is writing that এখন তো এই ধরনের নতুন দোকান এসে গেছে, আমাদের মিষ্টির কি হবে? নতুন দোকান implying the confectionaries, okay? Increasing shelf life, refrigeration, but there are many stories, and this is where I'm thinking, if you think of museum, there are also many ways to think a museum, right? If you think of museum as a sort of a living museum encouraging people to know what it is, right? Like today, who would have thought of a Mishti? I'm like really thinking, I'm feeling jealous about, there is another person who is actually doing a PhD on Mishti in this audience. And I'm like, wow, this was a beautiful opportunity for that person to actually be part of this festival and then go to write something, right? I never had that opportunity. Think about it, it took Michael Crondell to send me that Kesidas booklet, me going around 5 rounds, and then thinking, oh, there is a worth story, but I had not a single, very few articles to rely upon to think about the labor conditions of the sweet industry. Right. If it was not for the support of the field sites, then you couldn't have come up with then I couldn't have managed to go along with this journey. Also, I think a lot of things in the sweet industry are vastly changing, right? With standardization, I think there are, with the pressures of standardization, this is why I love Bengali sweet shops. They have not really given to that standardization. They're still innovating every day. But I think that the stories of everyday innovation needs to find a voice. And I'm sure, I hope one day, we take those stories of everyday innovation when we think about larger Bengali foodscapes, And particularly because why I'm thinking, when I said Mishti Museum, I'm also thinking museum not more in terms of where people come, go through the history, and that's about it, right? But if we could really tell a story from a perspective of the kind of, say, the cow breeds that have undergone a change in West Bengal. It was difficult to find that history, geography, all of that. But we have had an illustrious dairy industry and dairy scientist within Bengal who has worked quite tirelessly to improve the quality breeds, right? And I think that sort of a story hopefully deserves to be told and heard and also consumed. We as consumers, hopefully, we can only hope this is what the next generation, I think one of the things that I see. The second, I really feel and the solution, of course, will come from within the industry of, one, there's a lament of skilled karigors, but, what do we do about, can we skill karigors into this industry? Right. And what are the conditions that should be there? Right.
And all these pointers that in this thing that you said, changing times, changing technology, changing demands or pressures of modernization and standardization, health standards, and karigors. The challenge for the karigors I remember the conversation we were having, the challenge for the karigors, the traditional karigors who are, in their, 60s, 70s, who have to continuously adapt to a changing kitchen, if I may say, or the changing workshop. That somebody who used to habituated with using a chulha, a coal-based chulha, now has to do the same thing on a gas cylinder. Now he has to somewhere adapt to this challenge.
Adapt also, but let me also say that has also increased the, let me put it this way, not all changes are bad and terrible, because many of the karigors actually complained, senior karigors, that they developed asthma in workshops in the initial days because of that, right? So not all changes are bad, but however, you're absolutely right that, for instance, some of the karigors actually said about the mixing of the chana with sugar. It's a long process, right? It's quite a long, strenuous process of, using, literally this part of the palm and, whatever. When you think about this, with the love, care, that little bit of pressure, all of it, there is, I think, this also has to be trained somewhere. This requires a little bit of a formal training, if possible, because right now workers are hired through informal networks, right? through informal networks, which has worked so far. Because there is also, like you don't want everyone to come in.
But can it be called an unorganized sector?
It is.
It is.
It is an unorganized sector.
Yeah.
This thing, Dhimanda, would say, yes, it is very much an unorganized sector. Also, I think what has changed in the last few years is diversification of people beyond certain caste, class. For instance, in the Alsur Kesidas factory, there were workers from completely different religious backgrounds. And I thought it was a very, very brave move, that I experienced during my field work. Also, workers are training themselves on the job, right? Workers really train themselves on the job, because learning how to mix chana with sugar, I failed miserably many a times, and after that, like, let's put it this way, small scale production is a completely different thing from a workshop size production, and under that immense pressure of heat and this thing. I think one of the things that really need to change, or I don't know what can be done about it, is the way in which many of the sweet shops have undergone a change in the ventilation, etc. Right? They have really, really worked on it. It also requires a lot of money. Right. For instance, the sweet shop owner may get a loan from the bank. How about the chana supplier who wants a loan from the bank? I think Dhimanda had some point. If you
can I please add
Please, sir.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
No.
It's quite interesting, because that's why I wanted to add. First, regarding the karigars, actually we have already tied up with IIHM, Subarna versus IIHM, and like we have chefs in 5-star hotels. So I thought, why don't we have Mishti chefs also? Because there is a mental blockage of the previous, the next generation, ki ami moira hobo na, moirar kaj korbo. কিন্তু যেই মাথায় টুপি পরে শেফ হয়ে যাবে তখন কিন্তু একটা বিরাট ব্যাপার, ফ্যান্টাস্টিক ব্যাপার হয়ে যাচ্ছে। সো উই হ্যাভ অলরেডি স্টার্টেড দিস কোর্স, অ্যাকচুয়ালি দ্য কারিকুলাম ইজ বিং সেট in IHM, and we have requested the present karigars কি তোমাদের ছেলেদের at least সেইভাবে ট্রেন করো, so that at least they can do this course and then join us. Because we now have been bound by many FSSAI rules, guidelines.
Yes.
আগের মতন ব্যবসা করা যাবে না,
হ্যাঁ,
হাত দিয়ে, which you are saying, সেইটা চলবে না, গ্লাভস পরতেই হবে, মাথায় পড়তে হবে, which we already had introduced say 20-25 years back. সেটা এখন is being implemented as law. সেটা করতে হবেই, তাহলে ব্যবসা করা যাবে না। In fact, yesterday also I had a meeting with the director of FSSAI, and he also wanted a meeting with the association and the dairy industry. যেখানে we had complained যে আমাদের যে সোর্সটা সেটাই যদি ঠিক না থাকে, আমাদের FBOদের ধরা হচ্ছে, like
absolutely,
Pradeep Nag from Bhim Nag, he is also here, he might say যে ঠিক আছে আমাদের কারিগর দরকার, and কারিগররা কিন্তু আসছে মেনলি জেনারেশন ওয়াইজ, বাবা ছিল, বাবার পরে কিন্তু ছেলে আবার ঢুকছে, তাতে আমাদের কোনো আপত্তি নেই, কিন্তু তাকে ট্রেনিং দেওয়া হবে। এটা শুধু এইটাই নয়, আমি এটাও বলতে চাই, আজকে আমার নেক্সট জেনারেশান যে ঢুকবে ব্যবসায়, তাকেও কিন্তু একটা কোর্স করেই ঢুকতে হবে। এই নয় যে আমি বাবার ছেলে একটা গ্র্যাজুয়েশন করলুম, হ্যাঁ গদিতে বসে গেলুম, ব্যবসা করছি, কিন্তু বেসিক্সটা তো সে শিখলো না, তাহলে যেটা আমরা শিখে এসছি দ্যাট উইল বি আগেন ইমপ্লিমেন্টেড, তাহলে ডেভেলপমেন্ট তো কিছু হচ্ছে না।
Very true.
Very true. Very true.
And in fact, that's a very important note to end this discussion with. I think. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
We are running out of time. We have to wrap this session up. But this is really an interesting point that times will change, and it's very ironic, as you said, that an industry which is primarily based on handcrafted, the craftsmanship of hand, there the FSSAI is telling not to use the hands, and the industry has to adapt its way through that regulation. So I think this is something that probably those who, the gentleman who is doing the PhD right now can take it up in his research, how the industry is facing this challenge, if I may say. Let us end this session, but one last question. When is your book coming up? This is public harassment, she is saying. We all need to know. When is the book coming up, Ishita?
I make a promise that I will submit the manuscript. Yeah, this is like huge print. পরের বছর হবে. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ishita. Thank you everyone for joining us with this session. Thank you so much.